Are there lots of coaches? Yes. Do we need lots of coaches? Yes.
Yeah.
Are all coaches good at what they do? Maybe not. Our fears just come from our belief system. Well, often they
Mm.
just come from our belief system, and our beliefs are often based on stories that we've just told ourselves again and
Yes.
again and again. So actually, the really important thing about the title of the book is that there's a question mark at the end of it. So it's ready to quit your job. I mean, the first three letters of my name, my first name, are YES. So thanks to my parents, they gave me a very, very positive start in life. And I don't know, it's just yes is a good word, isn't it? We have positive associations with yes.
Welcome, Team ET, to today's episode of the ET Project. We're going to be exploring the transformative world of career transitioning. Well, it's sort of the prelude to the transition, I guess. We'll probably uncover a lot of secrets about how you can navigate professionally the change and do it with confidence and clarity. So in the episode, we'll discuss some strategies, some tips. We'll probably even have a couple of inspiring stories, I'm guessing, based on the conversation I just had with our guest prior to hitting the record. The aim, of course, is to empower you to be able to make some meaningful shifts in your career. And whether you're contemplating a new direction or you're seeking to enhance your current path, then I'm hopeful that our conversation today is going to equip you with some tools and most definitely the mindset that you need to succeed. And here today, as you will have heard me say in the intro, helping us unpack this journey is our guest, as well as the author of an excellent book that's titled Ready to Quit Your Job, Ms. Yesim Nicholson, and we're going to dive pretty much straight into it, but hopefully we'll answer some of your questions and eliminate the doubts that you've had that have probably been holding you back from making a career decision, and perhaps even more importantly, from taking action. So, Yesim, welcome to the ET Project. Wonderful to have you here
Thanks.
finally.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, you're sitting in Cotswold, right? Cotswold, yeah.
Correct.
Um, Many of our listeners will know where that is, many won't. So I'm wondering if you don't mind, just bring us into your living room and give us a short introduction about the environment. What's it look like out the window today?
Well, today, surprisingly for the UK, it's a little bit sunny. The sun does shine in the UK sometimes. It's rare, but it does happen. And today is one of those days. So like you say, I'm in the Cotswolds. I'm near Cirencester, which is the capital of the Cotswolds. And the Cotswolds is an outstanding, what's it called? An area of outstanding beauty in the
Ah,
UK. It's a very pretty part of the country. We're about an hour and a half from London, west of London.
mhm.
So I feel like we've got the best of both worlds. It's nice and quiet and very civilized and safe and clean and lovely, but close enough to cities to sort of enjoy everything that a city has to offer as well.
Right. Yeah, it is a beautiful spot. My sister likes going there a lot, so I get to see a lot of the pictures that her and her husband bring back. So very nice. Let's keep going with understanding a little bit about who you are and perhaps the journey you've been on professionally, and what inspired you to become a career coach.
Yeah, where do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, the inspiration behind I qualified as a coach, gosh, about 20 years ago now. And it's just something that I've always enjoyed. I love hearing people's dreams and aspirations. I love being part of the journey of taking a seed of an idea and making it happen. I find hugely exciting. So it's something that I've sort of they're skills that I've used on and off for the last 20 years.
Right.
And then more recently I've done quite a few different jobs. I've experimented because I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I came out of uni. Like a lot of my peers, we just sort of came out and went, oh, what can I do? And I again, like a lot of my peers after university, I went into the corporate world and did that for a few years, and it was great. I got to travel the world. They paid me good money. I met all sorts of amazing people. Some of my best friends are from that job. But after a few years of being there, I knew it wasn't right for me. And since then, I've really been on a journey of just following, okay, what's the next thing that excites me, and where
Right.
can I best use my skills, and so on. And so there's been a lot of change. And one thing I noticed getting to midlife is that I was surrounded by people my age who were really, really miserable in their jobs. And to me, I'm like, well, if you're not happy, then do something about it. But I know that it's easier said than done. And so after countless conversations, I was like, well, maybe this is something that I can genuinely help people with on a
Mm.
larger scale. So yeah, so that's how this business started, is just through conversations with friends. And now I run Yes Career Coaching, where I help people to explore what might be possible, having, worked in the same industry for, 2 decades, 3 decades,
Right.
helping to explore what might be possible for them. And that's how the book then came about, and the podcast. And now I spend my days talking about career change, and I love it.
Where did the business name come from? Is there a story behind the name?
Well, I mean, the first 3 letters of my name, my first name, are YES. So thanks to my parents, they gave me a very, very positive start in life. And I don't know, it's just yes is a good word, isn't it? We have positive associations with yes.
Mm,
And like anything is possible. So that's how Yes Career Coaching came out
very
of it.
good.
Yeah.
Now, are you in the association? I believe there's a company in America also with a similar name. Have you seen that?
I have seen that, yes.
I want, because when I first started to do some research in preparation for the conversation, I wondered if it was, you're in partnership together, but I assume you're separate.
Completely separate. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the podcast name is Your Big Career Move, if I'm correct. And I
Yes,
think your
correct.
YouTube channel is by the same handle, at Your
Correct.
Big Career
Yeah.
Move. Right. Okay.
Yep.
And the purpose of those two platforms, sharing more information about the career coaching, or is there a special purpose behind the two?
Yeah, so the podcast is really about showcasing people who have
Mm.
made big career changes, to basically inspire people that, if Bob can do it, then so can I. If Jane can do it, then so can I. And really just, again, I was having all these fascinating conversations with people who have made these incredible career changes from,
Yeah.
literally like a guy that was working for Formula One and now he's roasting his own coffee, and somebody that was in the printing business and is now doing dry stone walling, which is a big thing in the Cotswolds. We have dry stone walls everywhere. They're very
You
beautiful.
do. You
Um,
like your
but
rocks.
like a guy that was managing director of a company and he's now a beekeeper and making a really good business from that. So just all these fascinating stories. I
Mm.
was like, we need to share these stories because hopefully they'll inspire people to follow suit if they're feeling unhappy in their jobs.
Yeah. And I find running the podcast, you meet so many interesting people, just like you mentioned. And we were talking just before we came live. Part of our challenge when we're the host of the podcast is not to get so engulfed in the conversation that we forget that we're actually hosting the podcast. And it becomes quite fascinating sometimes in the logistics behind it. So yeah, let's shift a little bit now onto the book, and we'll start tackling some of the questions and the challenges that many of us probably face during our careers, specifically in the case of the book, the choice of whether to stay or leave.
Hmm.
And you open the book with, and I don't know the group, so you might have to remind me, but there's a verse from a song, I'm guessing, will I stay or will I leave? And it's very appropriate for the book. It's very appropriate for this topic. Who was the group again? Do you remember?
Do you know what? It's just escaped my mind, but luckily for us, I have a copy
You,
right
you have
here.
the book?
It's The Clash.
The Clash,
Do you
thank
want
you.
me to
Yes.
sing? Do you want me to sing it to you?
Oh, please.
I'm just joking. But the line
Yeah,
is, should I stay or should I go now? If I go, there will be trouble. And if I stay, it will be double. It's just one of those lines that I really love. And it just seemed like the perfect opening to my book.
yeah, very, very good. So let's start with the motivation behind the book. You touched on it when you were introducing before, but the book is called Ready to Quit Your Job. Is there a key message that you hope readers will take away from
Yeah, so actually, the really important thing about the title of the book is that there's a question mark at the end of it. So it's ready to quit your job.
it?
And the whole premise of the book is that I'm definitely not advocating that everybody should just go and quit their jobs. Everybody that's unhappy, just quit. Definitely not. I think we have to be pragmatic. We live in the real world, and we do have to be intentional about what we are going to do career-wise, because
Mm,
most of us don't have unlimited funds, and we do need funds to, eat and keep a roof over our heads and so on.
yes.
So, so really, it's looking at I think hopefully I take the reader on a bit of a journey of exploration of um it I think it forces people to just sort of stop and take stock of where they are and do a bit of self-reflection.
Hmm.
And then I say that there are four outcomes of the book. So the four outcomes are: you're going to be a remainer, a tweaker, a toe dipper, or a leaper. So if you don't mind, I'll just explain very briefly what they are.
Please.
So the Remainer is somebody that reads the book, or I have an online group coaching program. They sort of go through all the content and they go, do you know what? Actually, I've really learned that I actually work for the right organization. Their values really align with mine, and actually, I really like my colleagues and these projects that I'm involved in. They're actually really dear to my heart, etc., etc. And they sort of have a bit of an awakening, which sounds a
Yeah.
bit religious, but they have a bit of a sort of wake up call and go, do you know what? And they just then approach their work with a totally different mindset, and they show up as a better version of themselves. So
Mm,
that's the Remainer. Um, then you have the tweaker, and the tweaker is somebody that realizes that actually sort of 80% of their work is actually fine, but it's just the fact that I'm making it up. It could be that they work, 8 till 4, but actually, if they could just work 10 till 6, that would make all the difference to them, because it means they can take their kids to school or whatever it is. Or
right.
they might get involved in a slightly different project at work, or they might take on more responsibility, or relinquish some of their responsibility. And they're basically tweaking their existing work situation to make it work better for them.
Hmm.
Um, then the third option is the toe dipper. The toe dipper is somebody who knows that they want to make a change eventually. They want to take a leap of faith, but they're going to do the transition much more gradually, because they want to be safe about making that transition. So they might start operating a side hustle in their spare
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
or they might attend a course to develop their skills, or whatever it might be. So they're dipping their toes in different areas that interest them,
Yeah.
with the view of then making the transition at some point. And then last but not least is the leaper. And as the name suggests, it's somebody that goes, yeah, I absolutely know that I don't want to be in this job. I want to be doing this instead, and I've got a plan, and I've got some financial backing, and I'm just going to do it.
I would imagine all of us fall into one of those four categories
Yeah,
multiple times during our career.
definitely.
Yeah.
And we move through each of those sometimes as well, and we
Mm.
flip-flop between different ones.
I know I was preparing a program at the next stage after this part of the journey. And I was doing some research around the number of times people change careers or change their jobs throughout their career. And I was quite surprised how frequent it is. But when we look at these four categories, it becomes clear to me that this is almost a continuum throughout the
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
We're on this spectrum, and we're in one of these states progressively.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very,
But it's
very
just
interesting.
becoming more conscious of it. I think that
Yeah.
a lot of us are on this treadmill where we're just going through the motions, and it's almost Groundhog Day, where
Mm.
get up, get to work, feed the kids, eat, sleep, repeat.
Yeah.
And a lot of us don't really take the time to stop and go, hang on a tick, do I want the last 20 years to look like the next 20 years? Sorry, the next 20 years to look like the last 20 years?
Mm.
Um, and sometimes the answer is yes, and often it's no. So
Yeah.
it's just about taking the time out really and being intentional and asking all the right questions.
And that's a great segue into one of the areas in your book, which is talking about self-assessing and really coming to terms with where are you and what you want to achieve, and um, what do you need to be aware of before you then take a next step, type of thing. You go into a lot of detail about it. Is there anything specifically that jumps out as we're talking about it in relation to self-assessment that people could be aware of or should be?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it's just allocating a bit of time,
Mm-hmm.
because we're really good at allocating time to watching Netflix or to
Yeah.
scrolling through Instagram, or doing sort of mundane things that don't really contribute very much to us and our
Mm-hmm.
well-being. So it's just really being a little bit more intentional about how you spend your time. And, people do say to me, well, I don't have time to, explore other options. And
Right.
it's, a lot of people do feel time poor,
Mm.
but it's really just about prioritizing what you're spending your time on. And, and I'm not a huge advocate for multitasking, but it is possible to listen to podcasts while you're taking the dog for a walk,
Yeah.
to educate yourself or whatever. So it's just finding ways to carve out bits of time to really just reflect a little bit, and ask yourself the right questions.
Mm.
And so, somebody said to me a while ago, well, I don't know what the right questions are to ask myself. And I was like, well, yeah, that's a good point. And I guess that's why coaches exist, because
Mm.
hopefully we do know the right questions to ask. But I know also that not everybody can afford a coach. So I did put
Mm.
together 10 questions that people can ask themselves, which are on my website. I can send you the details, but they're
Yeah.
just 10 questions that are sort of just to get you starting slightly differently, slightly outside of the box that we find ourselves in sometimes.
Mm.
So yeah, happy to share that if you think that might help.
Yeah, for sure. And even throughout the book, you ask a lot of pertinent questions, and there's lists of questions in the book. So anyone that is interested and they're thinking about this topic, then the book will certainly act as a guide for you in this particular area. One of the things that I was thinking about, and you cover it in different ways in the book, is that the self-assessment process is very, very closely linked to a number of other factors, such as what's your mindset in that moment. How resilient are you as an individual in that moment for other reasons? What's the fear factor impact around the idea of changing jobs? So there's a whole raft of associated areas that you touch on in the book as well. Um, the fear factor is quite an interesting one, and I wonder, is there anything um, when you're working with your clients and they're talking about they're frightened of making the leap, or they're frightened about considering the resignation or whatever. How do you guide your clients in those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I love dissecting fears, because sometimes our fears just come from our belief system. Well, often they
Mm,
just come from our belief system, and our beliefs are often based on stories that we've just told ourselves again and
yes.
again and again.
Mm,
And sometimes that story is something that somebody told us when we were 3 years old, or 5 years
mm,
old, and it's then just been on repeat. Like
yeah.
somebody's I was working with recently, he said, well, I'm very lazy. And I was like, okay, so what are you basing that statement on? And
Mm,
then it's really, it's fun. You're a coach, you know how fun it can be to really just start unpacking that. Well, where
yeah.
does this belief come from that you're lazy? And if you genuinely believe that you're lazy, how does that impact everything that you do? How does it impact what you're putting out in the world? Well, how does it impact conversations you're having with people? How does it
Mm,
impact how you feel about yourself, how you show up in the world? And so fears are like that. It's really fun to unpack what the origin of that fear is
yeah.
and whether it's based on something that's real or something that we've just kind of made up for ourselves, or somebody
Mm,
else has instilled a fear in us. And so really it is just unpacking that and working out, is this fear or this belief something that's going to work for me going forwards?
mm,
And if it's not, I mean, fears are there for a good reason. Fears are there so we
yeah.
don't, go and kill ourselves. Basically, it's a very it's a good thing to have. We should
Mm,
all have some fears, but then there are some fears which, uh, at the complete other extreme, are ridiculous,
mm,
and holding us back from being who we want to be. So
yeah,
it's really it is fun to unpack those and play with them a little bit,
for
turn them
sure.
on
And
their heads.
absolutely. And to that point, like the opposite is almost having a positive mindset or having a positive outlook. And many people have the rose-colored glasses on permanently, and
Yeah.
that can also create the negative environment unintentionally, but it can also create a negative environment. Mindset for me is always a very broad topic. We have Carol Dweck with growth mindset, and that's so important. But when we really get deep into mindset and how we look at the world, um, this could be a whole coaching series for the podcast. So I'm not going to go deep in this, but mindset influences us in everything that we do with our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, etc. When you find people that do struggle with their mindset, is there techniques that you have within your practice? And I know you touch a little bit on different things in the book, but are there things that you use or techniques you use with your clients to help them adjust?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, mindfulness and meditation,
Mm,
it's it's a buzzword. And I remember the first time I sort of attempted meditation, I found it all quite hilarious and a little bit hippie, airy fairy. Definitely sort of tried it and then dismissed it for a few years and then came back to it. And and I see for myself how it's had a massive impact on me, and I see people around me who have adopted some mindfulness practice, and
mhm,
um it really is transformational.
yeah.
And it can really, I'm really up for being intentional and starting your day with, okay, what's my intention today? Plant the seed, and then look back at the end of the day as well and go, okay, what have I reaped today? What's gone
Yeah.
really well? But it is a practice. It's not something that happens overnight. And like I said, like the mindfulness, the meditation, I meet a lot of people that go, I tried that, didn't work. And it's like, okay, what, when you say you tried it, what is, because I know I've experienced it myself. I
Yes.
know I tried it and then was like, no. It is something that you have to work on. It's not
Yeah.
like, it's like being as a kid, if you're pushed into a pool, you're probably going to drown because you don't know how to swim, but you
Mm,
build up that skill over time. And
yeah.
after a while, you're doing breaststroke and front stroke and, freestyle, whatever. And it's the same with meditation. You start small and build it and build it and build it, and
Mm,
until it just becomes something that's very much part of you. So yeah,
mm.
huge fan.
I had a different story, but not along the same lines. But I also had to leave it and come back to it. So I know where you're coming from with that. I hear that from a lot of people as well. Let's imagine now that we've got ourselves mentally prepared. We've done our assessment. We've nailed those limiting beliefs. We've got the right mindset. We're in a positive mind frame. What's next? So we've set ourselves up. What do we do next in terms of
Yeah.
the journey?
Yes, lovely question. So, a lot of people that I work with know that they're not doing the right thing for them anymore. They've done a job that's perhaps served its purpose for the last 10, 20 years. But now they've got to a point in their life where actually it's not going to serve them anymore for, whatever reason. It's not going to work with family commitments, or,
Mhm.
it's not aligned with their values anymore, etc. Um, So they know they need a change, but a huge obstacle is, well, what the hell do I do instead? I'm not really sure. I
Exactly.
don't really know what I enjoy anymore. I don't know what gives me joy. I don't know how I can contribute.
Mm,
Um, so it sounds like a very dire place to be, right? Like, oh, I really don't know what to do. To me, that's really exciting. I'm like, well, if you don't know, let's start exploring.
mm,
And I do a little exercise with people where I get them to every day, just at the end of the day, just take a few minutes to reflect on the day. What are the things that made you feel excited, happy, in the flow, gave you butterflies, made you feel useful, whatever it might be. And really just start journaling those little moments throughout, sometimes big moments, but little, even what
mm.
might seem like insignificant moments throughout the day
Right.
that lit you up. So it's doing things like that. Then it's um exploring things, like one of my favorite stories is about my dad, actually, that he was a hotel manager all his life. And then he's sort of semi-retired, and
Mhm.
then in his mid 60s, he started going to a pottery course. He started making, I don't know, all sorts of interesting things, right, out of
Right.
ceramics. And lo and behold, he's really, really good at ceramics, but it's not something that he's ever done. But now he's like, he did his first exhibition at the age of 70 or 71 or whatever it was, and people are buying his creations. And
Mm,
honestly, the joy that he gets from that is incredible. I talk about him in my book as well. And he's not the only one. I come across lots of people who have this skill or this passion for something that they just haven't even, they didn't know it was there. It's in there somewhere, but until you experience it, you don't know that you're going to love it. So I really encourage people to try out new things, go on a new course, have a conversation with somebody that you maybe wouldn't normally talk to, and just explore, like just go outside of your normal
yeah.
boundaries and discover what is possible. I think it's the most exciting. Yeah, as you can probably tell, I get very enthusiastic about this, but I think it's such a fun thing to do, especially if you do have a job that's giving you that stability of an income. You know that you're going to get paid at the end of each month. While you're doing that, just start exploring other things. It's really exciting. There are so many fantastic things going on in the world, and
Yes.
it's just see what's going to capture your imagination.
Yeah, we could spend another hour just diving deeper into that. We're not
I
going to,
reckon we
but
could
we could for
easily.
sure. When you were talking, then a thought came to mind is I like to play devil's advocate, or I put the black hat on metaphorically every once in a while. Often when we look at methods and processes, we see it as a linear process. We see it as a perfect line in the sand and everything's going well. We know that, life is seldom always rosy, or can be, but it doesn't always serve up perfectly. I'm sure there's some common pitfalls that happen for people as they're on the journey as well. Do you come across any of your clients that stumble um, as they're trying to find their feet and trying to find that pathway?
Do you know the biggest stumbling blocks that I see people encounter is first of all themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're their biggest obstacles is often themselves and the stories they're telling themselves as to why they can't do something.
Right.
Um, and the second one is somebody in their lives that's telling them they shouldn't do it.
Mm.
So it could be a spouse, it could be a sibling, could be a parent, who's saying, "Oh, George, you're a great barrister. You're earning great money. You've got a lovely lifestyle. Your family depend on you. Is it really wise to go off and become an artist or,
Mm.
whatever it is that George wants to do?"
Yes.
And they plant these seeds of doubt.
Yep.
And they plant seeds of doubt, but beyond that, we have this thing where we don't want to let people down. We don't want to disappoint people.
Mm-hmm.
We, you know, we want to please people sometimes, not always, but we want to please people. So I think it's I and there are some people who will I call them the chief dream squisher in my book, the CDS for short. It's
Yep.
somebody that, and everybody I've ever spoken to has at least one person in their lives who's their chief dream squisher. They know that if they tell their dream to this person, it's gonna get squished in an instant. So
Yep.
my advice is always, work out who those people are and maybe spend less time with them or don't tell them your dreams. It's really
Mm.
simple. Talk to the I mean we do need somebody who's going to be real with us and is going to ask us challenging questions so that we are I guess realistic about things,
Mm.
but we don't want somebody that's going to go, "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I were you." No, "Oh, I've heard somebody else that tried to do that and they failed." We can do with less of that.
Right.
So it's really just being very deliberate about who you choose your dreams with, who you share
You
them with even. Yeah.
for sure, right? You've mentioned a few times about having a coach or having somebody, whether we use the word coach or whether it's a mentor, whether it's an accountability partner, whether it's your spouse, whoever, right? Um, how important is that for this particular journey? Do
Yeah.
you encourage your clients to try and find those people? Of course, they're with you already as the coach, but outside of you, how do you approach that?
Yeah. I mean, the people around you play a huge, huge role
Mm.
in any career transition. So again, I do urge people to be very deliberate about who they're spending time with.
Mm.
So there are people that are going to take you closer to your dream, and there are people that are going to take you away from it.
Yeah.
And being really deliberate about who you spend time with is going to have a massive impact. And actually, I have to say that the number one thing that I see that enables people to make a really successful career transition is a supportive partner.
Right.
It's very, very difficult to make the transition if you have a partner who's totally against you making that change.
Mm,
And so I have to say, almost without exception, the ones that make a very successful transition do have a partner that's their number one cheerleader and wants them to succeed.
right.
Um, but it is so it's having a spouse or a very close friend that is, if you're not in a relationship, having a very close ally basically that's there with you on the journey.
Mm,
And then it is, like you say, I think having a coach or somebody who's going to ask you again, I keep using this term, but ask you all the right questions, and is going to listen to you and not be judgmental and not have their own agenda to push, but they're
mm,
literally their critical friend that wants the absolute best for you and is going to ask you the questions that will help you along the journey.
right.
Um, and I think it's also really important to have role models,
Mm,
who are the people in your life that are already leading the life that you would love to live. And it might just be elements of their life. So it might be, you look up to your neighbor who somehow gets to travel for 6 months every year, or it might be, the your friend who only works, I don't know, 3 hours a day, or it might be somebody else that is involved in lots of different projects. And gosh,
mm,
wouldn't that be exciting to not just have one job, but to have 3 or 4 things on the go. So it's really just picking out elements of other people's lives, and they can be people you know personally, or they can be people, you know, sort of influencers, or I don't know, people that you've heard of that you can maybe follow on social media or whatever, and pick out elements of their lives that would be quite cool if you could have that in your life as well, and just, have them as your inspiration, basically.
right, right. We've jumped around the book quite a lot, as I'm aware, and I'm sure you're aware. Is there anything we haven't touched on in the book that you think is really important for the listener to hear about? Maybe even to influence them to go and buy a copy. That would be nice.
Why not? Is there anything? I mean, there's, like you say, I do cover quite a lot of things.
Mm,
Um, is there anything that I don't cover? Um, I mean, probably quite a few things, but I don't know why this has jumped into my head, is the importance of sleep, which
ah,
some of your listeners might be like, come on, sleep. What's sleep got to do with a career change? And actually, it's got a lot to do with it, because if you're having poor sleep,
yes.
it means that you're not waking up refreshed. You're not waking up in the best possible way. You're not going to have a great day. That's going to impact your mood. That's going to impact your thoughts. That's going to impact your beliefs. That's going to impact everything around you. And it's that domino effect. If you haven't had a good night's sleep, you're going to eat junk food. You're going to,
Yeah.
so it's like everything starts with good sleep. That's my definition of success, is a really good night's sleep. If I've slept well at night, that means that I'm not worrying about stuff. It means I've eaten well enough for my body to sleep well. I've drank enough. I haven't pissed anybody off that day that, then I'm worried about. So it's having a really good night's sleep is just a really great
Mm,
baseline for making a good decision about your career, because it can impact everything, your health. If you don't
yes.
sleep well, it's going to affect your health over time.
Mm,
And if you're in bad health, that's going to affect your work, which is going to affect how you feel about your career and on the whole. So it's
mm,
all, everything's linked. That's why my book
absolutely.
touches on everything, because
Yeah.
you can't separate your career from the rest of your life. You
Yeah.
you are your career, and your career is you.
And to your point, you talk about habits as well in the book, and you get into the habit of not sleeping enough, and then before you know it, it starts that domino effect, that ripple effect, which is typically negative, right? It has a negative outcome for most people. So the book,
Yeah.
again, with a question mark at the end, ready to quit your job. So if I give you my grammar lesson now, are you ready to quit your job?
Yeah. Do you know, it's funny you should mention that, because the original title would have been, in an ideal world, I was going to call it, Are You Really Ready to Quit Your Job?
Right.
That's really the question that I want to help answer. Um, but obviously it's not great to have a really long title. And
Yes.
actually I was interviewed on a podcast um, by a guy who's a he's a book coach, and
Okay.
he works with lots of authors, and he was like, that name is too long. You need to cut it back down. So that's how it ended up, ready to quit your job, question mark, because you're quite right, the grammar's not perfect.
It's good though. It's a talking point. Shifting away from the book for the moment before we wrap up, um, where do you see coaching in general, career coaching? Is there any trends you're seeing over in the UK with the whole AI space, with um, in some ways a saturation of coaching? Um, People calling themselves coaches. Like, do you see any trends evolving in the UK at the moment?
I don't know if I have noticed enough of a trend to comment on
Mm,
it. Um, Are there lots of coaches? Yes. Do we need lots of coaches? Yes.
yeah.
Are all coaches good at what they do? Maybe not.
If
Um,
anyone's listening to my questions today, you would answer no, because my questions have not been very good. But anyway,
they've been
we've managed to
excellent.
get through. So I appreciate your tolerance with that. What about technology then? If we're not talking about trends, what about AI in general and the impact that that may or may not have on the coaching world? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, I'm really torn on AI because I do use elements of it in my
Mm,
work.
mm,
Um, and it saves loads of time for sure. So when I'm putting together my podcast, for example, I can ask the tool that I use, I can ask it to suggest
yeah,
some teasers, some reels from the interview, and it saves me hours and hours of
mm,
trawling through the interview. So I do use it for stuff like that, and I can see the benefits of that.
yeah.
And I know that people are turning to it for coaching. And in all honesty, I think probably it can ask you good questions, but what's missing for me is that personal
Mm,
um, connection. And I think that's why I love coaching so much. And I think it's so rare now that, I mean, I even know lots of coaches who are really terrible listeners when they're, not in coaching mode, if you know what I mean. So that I'll have a conversation with a coach. They'll tell me they're a coach, and then they'll talk at me for an hour nonstop. And I find that quite interesting because as a coach, as you know, the first thing that you're taught is to listen, listen, and listen some more.
mm,
And I think we've lost that art as a, as a species. We're not very good at listening anymore. And I think having that connection with somebody, and having somebody really uninterruptedly listen to you for an hour or 45 minutes or even 10 minutes is something that's lost. And I think that I don't know if you can get that with AI. I think it's pure joy when somebody really listens to you and really takes in what you're saying and doesn't respond with, oh, you've got a headache, oh, I've got a migraine. But gosh, I'm sorry to hear you've got a headache. What do you think might be causing it?
mm.
Is really refreshing, I think. I don't know,
It,
what's your view?
Similar in many ways with you. We incorporate AI, so we offer, excuse me, we offer both the AI app for people who want the flexibility, but we tie it together with the human coaching as well. So we offer,
Yeah.
a bit of both.
Yeah.
Um, I I think for better or for worse, it's here to stay, and I believe that it will evolve. At the moment, if we look at the AI that we have, it's really just a closed loop, self-feeding funnel at the moment with generative AI. So it's got the base, and all that's really happening is we're adding input, and it's trying to grow from that amount of input, until we get to that really AGI level where it starts to become self generative. Then I don't see it's going to go a lot further, but I'm not an expert. That's
Well, it'll be
just my view.
interesting to see, won't it? It
It
will be
will,
interesting to
yeah,
see what can AI do that a human being can't.
yeah. There's a
And
lot of prediction out there, of course, that singularity is on the horizon. Um, so let's see. I guess it will definitely change everything. It's already changing everything, but it will change it in many different ways, I think. So
yeah.
what's the plan of the future for you and for Yes Career Coaching? Are you looking at anything on the horizon yourself?
Well, there may or may not be a second book.
Ah,
I'm just in the very, very early stages of starting to research another topic that's very dear to my heart, which has come off the back. It's funny, before I wrote this book, I never thought I would write a book. I
mm,
just, it just wasn't something that I thought I would do. And I remember listening to an interview recently with an author who said the same. He said, I never thought I'd write a book. And then I did write a book. And then as I was writing the first book, I thought, I'm never going to have anything else to say. This is the only book I'll ever write. And then he did go on to write a second and a third and a fourth book. And I'm finding myself in exactly that. I was like, I'm never going to write a book. It's not on my radar. Then I did write a book. And then as the first book was coming to an end, I had this idea for a second book. And now I can't stop thinking about that. So it's quite interesting. It's quite an interesting
it
thing to
is.
go through. So I'm
Yeah.
just in the sort of very, very early stages of researching what might go into that book. So there's that. And then, um, I mean, I really love my coaching. I love working with people. I love my podcast. So yeah, more of the same for now. Watch
Mm,
this space. Ask me again
watch
in a
this
year's
space.
time. Yeah.
Well, on that note, where do people go to watch?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Your Big Career Move, and it's available on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And my website is yescareercoaching.com. And I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if anybody wants to connect with me, I believe there's only one Yesim Nicholson in the world, so it should be relatively easy to find me.
Very good, very good. So maybe last question, final piece of advice for the listeners. Anything you would leave them with in relation to our topic?
Yeah, I think if you're listening and you're not happy in your job, explore why you might be feeling discontent and see whether it is the job itself or is it other stuff that's happening in your life that's making you
Mm,
feel a bit rubbish about the work that you're doing. If you explore, everything else in your life is great and it really is just the job, the environment the environment you're in is hugely important. If you're surrounded by the right sort of people who have the same values as you, the same ethic, the same sense of humor even, makes a huge difference to your day to day.
mm,
So if you feel like you're in the wrong place, then just start exploring, just explore what might be possible. And I promise there will be there's something on the horizon for you that is going to make your working life much more fun. And I mean, we spend such a huge amount of our lives doing work. You might as well do something that you feel excited and passionate about. What's the point otherwise? It's it's a waste of your talents and your passions if it's sitting around doing a job that you don't enjoy.
mm. Well, it's certainly a great conversation, and I've enjoyed it. I'm never sure whether our listeners enjoy it as much as me, but I've enjoyed it. So that
Let's
That's
hope
my
so. Fingers
barometer.
crossed.
But thank you for being a guest on the ET project. Wonderful to connect, and I look forward to continuing the conversation as we move through the career, our own careers. So thank you once again for being on the show.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.